First letter.
To Mrs. Saville in England. From St. Petersburg, December 11th. You'll be glad to hear nothing has gone wrong, at least not yet. I arrived safely in St. Petersburg yesterday, and my first thought was to write you, dear sister, to ease your heart. Despite your fears, I feel more certain than ever that this journey is my destiny. The northern winds here speak to my soul in ways I never felt in London. Each cold gust fills me with a wild joy, as if already carrying me toward the frozen realm I seek. In my dreams, the North Pole is no wasteland, but a place of wonder, where the sun skims the horizon in eternal light. Explorers whisper of seas free from ice, of lands more magnificent than any yet known. Perhaps I'll uncover the secret of the compass needle, or glimpse sights that explain the scattered stars above. No human footsteps have marked those distant shores. That thought alone would drive me forward, even if death stood in the way. I feel like a child shoving off in a tiny boat, heart pounding with the joy of discovery. Yet beyond personal longing, think of what it could mean for all humanity. A quicker passage through the pole, or unlocking the mysteries of magnetism itself. Writing steadies me. My heart soars with purpose, and isn't that the truest peace? To have a star to follow, a dream to chase. This vision has lived with me since childhood, born from countless hours in Uncle Thomas's library, devouring tales of Arctic voyages. Father's wishes kept me from the sea in youth, but those dog-eared books became my whole world. For a time, poetry lured me from these dreams. I lived for verses and rhymes, hoping to stand among Homer and Shakespeare. You know how quickly that dream collapsed. Then fate intervened. My cousin's inheritance arrived just when I needed a new path. 6 years have passed since I vowed to this quest. I trained my body against hardship, working alongside whale fishers, battling cold, hunger, and exhaustion. While others slept, I studied mathematics, medicine, and science. Twice I served as undermate on whaling ships, proving myself so well the captain begged me to stay, offering me second command. So tell me, dear Margaret, haven't I earned the right to attempt something extraordinary? I could have chosen comfort, but I longed for glory. Oh, how I wish one voice would tell me I'm not chasing shadows. My resolve is firm as Arctic ice, but at times my hope flickers like a candle in the wind. I know the journey ahead will test me, lifting the crew's spirits while guarding my own. The Russian winter is kinder to travelers than one might expect. Our sledges skim the snow like phantoms, far more graceful than those rattling English coaches I once endured. The cold is fierce, but furs make it bearable. There is a vast difference between striding a ship's deck and sitting still for hours, letting frost creep into the blood. I have no wish to perish on these lonely roads between St. Petersburg and Archangel, becoming just another winter tale. In 2 or 3 weeks, I will reach Archangel, where I'll secure a vessel, easily enough when one can pay the owner's bond, and gather a crew from the seasoned whalers of the north. By June we set sail. When shall I return? That question echoes like distant thunder. If fortune smiles, months or even years may pass before we embrace again. If I fail, well, either I'll be home soon or never. Farewell, my beloved sister. May heaven's light shine on you always, and grant me life enough to prove myself worthy of your love. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton.
Second letter.
To Mrs. Saville, England. From Archangel, Russia, March 28th. How slowly time passes here, surrounded as I am by frost and snow. Still, another step is taken toward my enterprise. I have secured a vessel and begun gathering my sailors. Those already enlisted seem men of courage, steady and reliable. Yet one great need weighs heavily on me, Margaret. I have no friend. When I succeed, there will be no one to share my joy. If I fail, no one to lift me from despair. I may pour my thoughts onto paper, but writing is a poor substitute for the gaze of a companion who truly understands. You may think me romantic, dear sister, but I feel the lack keenly. I long for a friend, gentle yet courageous, with a cultivated and expansive mind, someone whose tastes match my own, who might correct my faults. For you know them well. I am too ardent in execution, too impatient with obstacles. Worse still, I am largely self-taught. Until 14, I ran wild, reading little beyond Uncle Thomas's books of voyages. Only later did I discover our great poets, and by then it was too late to master the languages that would have enriched me most. Now, at 28, I sometimes feel less learned than schoolboys half my age. My imagination is fertile, my ideas ambitious, but they often lack structure. Oh, how I need a companion who would not scorn me as fanciful, but care enough to help steady my mind. Well, my grumblings are pointless. Such a friend is not to be found among merchants and seamen in Archangel, nor likely on the wide ocean. Yet even here, I have seen glimpses of nobility. My lieutenant, for instance, is a man of extraordinary courage and drive. He burns with ambition. Though in truth it is advancement in his profession, he seeks more than glory itself. An Englishman of limited education and narrow views, yet still endowed with some of humanity's finest qualities. I first met him aboard a whaler, and finding him unemployed here, I engaged him at once. My captain, too, has an admirable nature. Among sailors, he is remarkable for his gentleness and fair discipline. His reputation for honesty and courage made me eager to secure his service. You know, sister, that my own character, shaped in solitude under your gentle care, cannot abide the cruelty often deemed necessary at sea. I never believed brutality was essential, and when I heard of a sailor both kind and respected by his crew, I knew I had found someone rare. I first learned of him through a woman who credited him with her happiness. Years ago, he loved a young Russian woman of modest fortune. With prize money he had earned, he gained her father's consent to marry. But when he met her before the wedding, she wept at his feet, confessing her love for another, a poor man her father would never accept. My friend immediately released her, and learning the name of her beloved, he sacrificed all, the farm he had purchased for their life together, and even the remainder of his fortune, so the young man could support her. He pleaded with the father to permit their union, but the old man refused, bound by a sense of honor. Only when my friend left the country did the father finally relent, and the woman was at last allowed to marry the man she loved. What a noble soul! And yet, for all this, he is uneducated, silent, rough, careless in manner. These things lessen the sympathy he might otherwise command, yet make his generosity all the more astonishing. Do not mistake my laments for hesitation. My resolve is fixed as fate. My voyage waits only for the weather to turn. The winter has been severe, but spring comes early this year. Perhaps I may sail sooner than expected. I promise you I will not act recklessly. You know me well enough to trust that I will be cautious where others' lives are at stake. I can scarcely describe my feelings as I stand on the threshold of this adventure. My whole body trembles, part excitement, part fear, as I prepare to set out. I am bound for uncharted seas, the land of mist and snow, though I vow not to repeat the ancient mariner's mistake of killing an albatross. Don't worry, I shall not return cursed and broken like he did. You may smile at the reference, but I confess I believe my passion for the ocean's mysteries was born from that poem, the work of our most imaginative modern poet, Coleridge. Something stirs in my soul that I cannot fully explain. I am diligent, practical, able to labor with perseverance. But intertwined with this is a hunger for wonder, a conviction that the marvelous is real. That conviction drives me beyond the ordinary paths of men and into the wild seas and untouched regions that now await. But let me return to what matters most, you. Will I see you again, after crossing vast oceans and rounding the southern tip of Africa or America? I dare not hope too much, yet I cannot bear to imagine the reverse. So write whenever you can. Your letters may reach me at the very moments I most need them to lift my spirits. I love you deeply. Remember me with affection, even if someday no more letters come. Your affectionate brother, Robert Walton.
Third letter.
To Mrs. Saville, England. July 7th. My dear sister, I write in haste to assure you of my safety as we press ever northward through these strange waters. This letter goes south aboard a merchant ship bound for England from Archangel, a vessel more fortunate than mine, for I may not see our green shores for many years to come. But take heart. My spirits remain high, and my crew is resolute. Even as vast sheets of ice drift past us like pale ghosts, foretelling the dangers ahead, not one man shows fear. We have reached far into these northern latitudes, and though summer here is but a shadow of our own, the southern winds that fill our sails breathe life and hope into our journey. So far our passage has been mercifully quiet, hardly the stuff of stirring letters. A few fierce winds, a small leak swiftly mended. Such trials hardly trouble seasoned sailors. May the rest of our voyage prove as uneventful. Farewell for now, my dear sister. Rest assured that I keep my own safety as close in mind as yours. I will remain level-headed, determined, and careful in all I do. Yet my heart cannot help but swell with confidence. Already I have carved a path through trackless seas, with the very stars above bearing witness to how far I've come. What should prevent me from pressing onward across these wild but conquerable waters? What force could hope to withstand the iron will of a determined soul? My thoughts overflow, but I must close. May heaven guard you always, my beloved sister. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton. Fourth letter. To Mrs. Saville, England, August 5th. Something so extraordinary has happened that I must write it down, though you may see me in person before this letter ever reaches you. Last Monday, the ice closed around us like a pale prison, leaving the ship barely space to float. A thick fog wrapped us too, each passing hour making our situation more perilous. We could do nothing but wait, hoping for mercy from the weather. At 2 o'clock the mist lifted, revealing an endless plain of ice stretching to every horizon. My crew's spirits sank, and I confess my own grew heavy, until something remarkable caught our eyes. Through the telescope, we saw a sledge drawn by dogs gliding across the ice half a mile away. The driver appeared human, yet impossibly tall, like a giant, steering his team northward until the ice swallowed him from view. We could hardly believe what we had seen. To think ourselves hundreds of miles from land, and yet to glimpse such a figure. It seemed a ghostly vision. We marked his trail with care, but the ice held us fast, keeping us from pursuit. 2 hours later came the deep rumble of the ground sea, and before nightfall the ice cracked. Our ship broke free, but I dared not risk navigating in darkness, so we waited until morning. At dawn I stepped on deck to find the crew calling to someone adrift on a great slab of ice. Another sledge had drifted to us in the night. Only one dog remained alive, and with it a man. But not some savage from an unknown shore, a European gentleman. The captain called out to him, "Come aboard, sir. I will not let you perish here." The stranger answered in accented but clear English,
"Before I accept, may I ask, where are you bound?"
I could scarcely believe his question. With death so near, surely any port would be welcome. But I told him truthfully, we sought the northern pole. At this, he seemed satisfied and agreed to board. Oh, Margaret, had you seen him? His limbs were nearly frozen, his body wasted by exhaustion and hunger. Never have I looked at a fellow creature in such a state. He fainted the instant we lifted him aboard. We revived him with brandy, then wrapped him in blankets and placed him near the galley fire, feeding him small sips of broth until his life returned. For 2 days he lay silent, and I feared the cold had taken his reason along with his strength. When at last he stirred, I moved him into my cabin and cared for him whenever I could. His eyes burn with a wild light, bordering on madness, yet at the slightest kindness, his whole face softens into a warmth unlike any I've ever seen. But the gentleness fades quickly. More often he is sunk in despair, grinding his teeth as though crushed by secrets too terrible to bear. The men clamoured for answers, but I forbade them from pressing him. He needed rest, not interrogation. Only the lieutenant dared ask why he had ventured across the ice in so strange a manner. A shadow fell across his face.
"To pursue one who fled from me."
Did he travel the same way?
"Yes."
When we told him of the figure we had seen the day before, his spirit quickened. He pressed us for every detail, calling the man his demon. Later, alone with me, he said quietly,
"I must have stirred your curiosity, as I have the others, but you are kind enough not to pry."
"Of course," I replied. It would be cruel to burden you now.
Yet you saved me from death itself. You restored me to life.
He asked if I thought the breaking ice had swallowed the other sledge. I told him I could not say. The ice held until midnight, so perhaps the traveler reached safety. But certainty was impossible. This seemed to revive him. He longed to keep watch for the other sledge, but I persuaded him to remain below. He is far too weak for the cold. I promised the crew would keep vigil and alert him at once, should we see anything. That is all I can record for now. Our guest grows stronger daily, though he tenses when anyone but I approaches. Yet even in his broken state, the men admire him. And as for me, I have come to love him like a brother. His suffering is great, but his spirit is noble still. Margaret, do you remember when I wrote that I would never find a friend on these vast seas? Yet here, against all odds, I believe I have. Before misery scarred him, he must have been the truest brother of my heart. I will write more about him when I can. August 13th. My affection for our mysterious guest deepens with each passing day. He stirs in me both admiration and pity. How can I watch such a noble spirit drowning in sorrow without my own heart breaking? His wisdom and refinement reveal themselves in every word. He speaks with measured care, yet his thoughts flow like poetry. Natural, profound, unforced. His health has improved enough that he now spends his days on deck, eyes fixed on the horizon, searching for the sledge that passed before his own. Even in his grief, he shows genuine interest in others. Often he questions me about my plans, listening with keen attention to every detail of my preparations. His sympathy made it easy to open my heart, to let the fire of my ambition burn bright in my words. I told him how gladly I would sacrifice wealth, life, and every hope if only I could achieve this dream. What was one life, I said, compared to knowledge that might help humanity master nature's harshest powers? As I spoke, a shadow crossed his face. He tried to hide his emotion, covering his eyes, but I saw tears slipping between his fingers. A groan broke from his chest, and when he spoke, it was in anguish.
Poor soul. Has this madness seized you too? Have you drunk from the same poisoned cup? Listen to my story, and you will cast it away.
Such words lit my curiosity like flame, yet his grief overwhelmed him. It took many hours of rest and gentle talk before his spirit grew calm again. Once composed, he seemed ashamed of his outburst. Struggling against despair, he turned the conversation back to my life. I spoke of my longing for true friendship, for someone who might truly understand me, saying that no one could be happy without such a blessing.
You speak the truth. We are incomplete beings, only half-formed, without someone wiser and dearer to help shape our flawed natures. I once had such a friend, the noblest soul alive, and so I know what friendship means. You still have hope, a world before you, but I have lost it all. I cannot begin again.
The quiet sadness in his voice pierced me to the heart. Then he fell silent and withdrew to his cabin. Though broken, he still feels the beauty of nature more deeply than anyone I have known. The stars, the sea, the frozen wilderness, these lift his spirit beyond earthly cares. He seems to live in two worlds, in one, crushed by suffering, in the other, radiant, almost angelic, as if wrapped in a light no darkness can reach. Perhaps you will smile at how I praise this haunted wanderer. You would not if you met him. Your careful nature would only make you more aware of what sets him apart. I have tried to understand it myself. It is his insight, quick, unerring, almost uncanny. To this is joined a gift for expression and a voice whose tones strike the soul like music. August 19th. Yesterday he turned to me, his voice heavy with memory.
You can see, Captain Walton, that my life has been marked by terrible sorrows. I meant to take my secrets to the grave, but something in you has changed my mind. You, too, pursue knowledge. I pray your quest does not destroy you as mine destroyed me. Perhaps my story cannot save you, but if you succeed, it may guide you, and if you fail, it may comfort you. Be ready for wonders and horrors alike. In civilization, you might laugh at what I shall tell, But here, in these northern wastes, you will find it easier to believe in nature's stranger powers. The truth of my tale lives in every detail.
His offer filled me with excitement, though I hated to see him relive his pain. Curiosity drew me on, yes, but more than that, I longed to ease his suffering if I could. I told him so.
Thank you for your kindness, but it cannot change what is done. I wait now for one last thing, and then I shall rest. I see you would speak, but please understand, my friend, if you permit me the word, my path is fixed. Listen, and you will see why nothing can alter it.
He promised to begin his story the next day, when I had time to hear it fully. I thanked him warmly, my heart racing with anticipation. I have resolved to write down everything he tells me, preserving his words as closely as I can, each night after my duties. If pressed for time, I will at least keep notes. You, my dear sister, will one day read this manuscript with fascination. But for me, hearing it in his voice, seeing his eyes alight with sorrow and fire, it will hold a power words alone can never capture. Even now, as I write, I see him before me. His thin hand raised in passion, his face glowing with spirit. Whatever tale he unfolds, it must be terrible indeed, like a mighty storm that seizes a proud ship and dashes it to pieces. Here now is his story.
Chapter 1.
I was born in Geneva into one of its most distinguished families. For generations, my ancestors served as advisors and leaders, and my father upheld that tradition with tireless dedication. All who knew him praised his integrity and his devotion to the public good. Duty filled his youth, leaving little time for love, until fate surprised him in the autumn of his life. The story of my parents' union reveals much about his character. His closest friend, Beaufort, a prosperous merchant, fell into ruin through a cruel chain of misfortunes. Proud and unyielding, Beaufort could not endure the shame of decline. After settling his debts honorably, he withdrew with his daughter to Lucerne, seeking obscurity in its quiet streets. My father, bound to him by the deepest friendship, mourned this self-imposed exile and searched tirelessly to bring comfort. For 10 months, Beaufort's fate was unknown. At last, my father discovered him in a humble dwelling by the Reuss River, only to find despair waiting at the door. Though Beaufort had hoped to find employment, his resources dwindled and melancholy consumed him. Within months, illness struck, leaving him confined to his bed. His daughter, Caroline, tended him with unshakable devotion. She supported them as best she could, plaiting straw, mending clothes, doing whatever humble labor her hands could find. Her spirit was as rare as it was beautiful, resilient, generous, uncomplaining. But her father's health declined steadily, and by the 10th month he died in her arms, leaving her utterly alone. She wept by his coffin until my father appeared, as if sent by Providence. He took her under his protection, brought her to Geneva, and placed her in the care of relatives. 2 years later, she became his wife. Though many years separated them in age, their love only deepened because of it. My father's sense of justice made him value virtue above all, and his love for my mother bore a special reverence, born from gratitude as well as affection. He sheltered her as one might a fragile flower, striving to erase the memory of her past suffering. Her trials had marked her health and spirit, so in the years before their marriage, he gradually withdrew from public affairs, and after their union they journeyed to Italy, hoping its beauty and gentler air might restore her soul. I was born in Naples, the fruit of my parents' deep devotion. For many years I was their only child, the object of a love that seemed drawn from some inexhaustible well. Even now I can recall my mother's gentle touch and my father's tender smile, as if they were before me still. I was their treasure, their joy, but more than that, their sacred charge. They felt the weight of guiding a new soul through the world, knowing their choices might shape my path toward light or shadow. That sense of duty, joined with their natural warmth, made my early years pass like a dream of gentleness, each day teaching patience and kindness through the softest of lessons. For 5 years I remained their sole delight, though my mother quietly longed for a daughter. During a journey beyond Italy's borders, we lingered on the shores of Lake Como, where their compassion drew them into the cottages of the poor. For my mother especially, such visits were a calling. Having known both despair and deliverance, she longed to become a guardian angel for others. One day, while my father was in Milan, we entered a desolate cottage in a lonely valley. Inside, a family struggled against crushing poverty. Among their children stood one unlike the rest, her presence radiant even amid rags. While her foster siblings were dark-eyed, she had hair like spun gold and eyes clear as alpine lakes. Her bearing, though unstudied, carried a grace that marked her as something rare, a flower blooming among stones. The peasant woman, seeing my mother's wonder, told her story. She was the child of a Milanese nobleman and a German mother who died in childbirth. Her father, a fervent patriot, had vanished into Austria's prisons, leaving her to the mercy of strangers. Yet even in hardship, she grew like a wild rose among thorns. When my father returned, he found the child, Elizabeth, playing with me in our villa. She seemed almost to cast light rather than reflect it. With his blessing, my mother arranged to take her under our protection. Though her foster family parted with her reluctantly, they understood, guided by their priest, that her gifts deserved more than poverty could give. Elizabeth became the very heart of our household, beloved by all who knew her. The night before, my mother had promised me a special gift. When she presented Elizabeth the next day, I received her with the gravity of a vow. From that moment I claimed her as mine, to protect, to cherish, to love. Though we called each other cousins, the word never captured what she truly was. She was more than sister, more than friend. She was my destiny, promised to me for life.
Chapter 2.
Elizabeth and I grew up as one, scarcely a year between us. We never quarreled. Our souls seemed joined in perfect harmony, our differences drawing us closer rather than driving us apart. She carried a quiet grace, while I burned with restless fire, consumed by a hunger for knowledge. Elizabeth found her joy in poetry and the beauty of our Swiss homeland, the mountains piercing the clouds, the shifting moods of the seasons, winter's hushed silence, and summer's wild abundance. Where she saw wonder, I saw mysteries demanding to be solved. My earliest memories glow with that burning curiosity, that delight in uncovering nature's hidden laws. When my brother was born, 7 years younger than I, our wandering days ended as my parents settled permanently in Geneva. We kept a home there and a country house at Bellerive, a league from the city on the lake's eastern shore. We lived mostly in that retreat, preferring quiet over the bustle of society. Like them, I loved solitude and the company of a chosen few. I gave little attention to most of my schoolmates, save one who became my truest friend, Henry Clerval, the son of a Geneva merchant. Henry possessed both remarkable talent and unrestrained imagination. He craved adventure, even danger, for its own sake. Immersed in tales of knights and romance, he wrote heroic songs and stories of enchantment. He led us in acting out plays, dressing as legendary knights and paladins, brave souls shedding their blood for holy causes. No child could have known greater happiness than I. My parents embodied kindness, never ruling as tyrants but nurturing all that was good in us. When I saw other families, I understood my blessings more fully, and gratitude deepened my love for them. Though my temper ran hot and my passions fierce, they found release not in quarrels or games, but in an unrelenting desire to learn. I cared little for language, politics, or the affairs of men. What called to me were the secrets of heaven and earth, whether in the physical world or in the hidden workings of nature and the human soul. My quest was always for the deepest truths. While I sought nature's mysteries, Clerval explored humanity's moral heart. He dreamed of heroes and noble deeds, hoping to join the ranks of those remembered as benefactors of mankind. And Elizabeth, dear Elizabeth, was our guiding star, her gentle soul illuminating our home. Her smile, her voice, her angelic presence blessed and inspired us both. She was love itself, softening my fiery spirit with her calm, and even tempering Henry's noble imagination, teaching him that true greatness lies in doing good. How sweet it is to linger on these memories of childhood before shadow touched my mind and twisted my dreams of service into selfish obsession. Yet to tell of those bright days is also to trace the path that led to misery. When I search for the source of the passion that ruled my fate, I find it like a mountain stream, beginning in purity, but swelling into a flood that swept away all joy and hope. It was natural philosophy, what we now call science, that set my destiny. I was 13 when fate first nudged me onto that path, during a pleasure trip to the baths near Thonon. Rain kept us confined in our inn, where I discovered an old volume of Cornelius Agrippa. What began as idle curiosity quickly grew into fascination. New worlds seemed to unfold before me, and I rushed to share my discovery with my father. He barely glanced at the title before dismissing it. "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa. My dear Victor, don't waste your time on such nonsense." If only he had explained that Agrippa's ideas had been disproven, that modern science offered real power instead of ancient fantasies, I might have set the book aside and turned to safer studies. Perhaps I would have avoided the fatal path that followed. But his careless dismissal only convinced me he had not grasped the book's contents, and so I read on, more eager than ever. Back home, I sought out every work of Agrippa I could find, then turned to Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus. Their strange theories struck me as secret treasures, known only to the few who dared look beyond the ordinary. I had always burned to understand nature's mysteries, and even the brilliant discoveries of modern philosophers left me yearning for more. They say Newton himself felt like a child gathering shells beside the vast ocean of truth. To me, even his successors seemed like beginners playing on the same endless shore. The farmer knew the elements well enough for his harvest. The philosopher knew little more. They had pulled back nature's veil an inch, yet her true face remained hidden. They could name and categorize, but the deeper causes eluded them. I saw these barriers between mankind and nature's secrets, and I raged against them. But here, in these books, were men who claimed to have gone further, to have pierced the hidden mysteries. I believed every word and became their devoted pupil. It may seem strange that such ancient teachings could captivate a youth of the 18th century, but I was largely self-taught in this pursuit. My father, no man of science, left me to wrestle with both childish ignorance and unchecked ambition. Under these new masters, I threw myself into the search for the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. The latter soon consumed me entirely. Wealth held no interest for me, but what glory to free humanity from disease, to make us invulnerable to all but violent death. My dreams did not stop there. My beloved authors promised the power to summon spirits and command demons. When my attempts failed, I blamed my own errors rather than questioned their wisdom. I drifted deeper into obsolete theories, weaving contradictions like an amateur alchemist, drowning in knowledge without understanding, until chance intervened and changed everything. At 15, while staying at our house near Bellerive, I witnessed a storm of astonishing power. It swept down from behind the Jura Mountains, thunder crashing from every side at once. I watched, enthralled, until a bolt of lightning struck an ancient oak, scarcely 20 yards from the house. In a single blinding flash, the tree was gone, leaving only a blackened stump. By morning, we found it not splintered, but reduced to delicate ribbons of wood. the most complete destruction I had ever seen. The lightning's ruin brought more than a fallen oak. It also struck at the foundations of my young mind. A natural philosopher staying with us explained the new theories of electricity and galvanism, and under his light the books I once worshipped, Agrippa, Paracelsus, Albertus Magnus, suddenly seemed like children's fables. Their mysteries shrank to shadows beside modern science's stark precision. Yet, instead of inspiring me, this revelation filled me with despair. At 15, the mind is easily unbalanced, and what I had thought was an endless frontier now seemed a hollow waste. In the feverish way of youth, I renounced natural philosophy altogether, dismissing it as a false path. I turned instead to mathematics, seeking its solid truths and unchanging order. For a time I believed I had found peace. How strange that our fates can hinge on moments so small, our souls guided by threads fine as spider silk. Looking back, I see that turn as my guardian angel's last attempt to save me, a desperate hand reaching to draw me back from the gathering storm. For a brief season, serenity covered me like fresh fallen snow, pure and unbroken. I thought happiness lay there, in turning away from those dark pursuits. But fate's current runs deeper than any warning. That calm was only the pause before the tempest. My ruin was already written in the stars, fixed as the very laws of nature I longed to master.
Chapter 3.
At 17, my parents decided I should study at the University of Ingolstadt. Though I had been content with my studies in Geneva, my father believed I needed to experience life beyond our sheltered valley. A date was set for my departure, but before that day could dawn, fate cast its first dark shadow across my path, a grim herald of all that was to come. Elizabeth fell ill with scarlet fever, and death hovered at her bedside. We begged our mother to keep her distance, and at first she agreed. But when she heard Elizabeth might not survive, her love overcame caution. She nursed her tirelessly until Elizabeth's health returned. For a moment we rejoiced, only for tragedy to strike. On the third day my mother herself fell ill, the fever burning through her with terrible speed. The doctors' grave faces told us more than their words could. Even as death approached, her grace never faltered. She joined Elizabeth's hand with mine, her touch tender despite her weakness.
My children, I dreamed of seeing your happiness together. Let that dream comfort your father now. Elizabeth, my darling, you must be mother to the little ones. Though it breaks my heart to leave you, after such joy and love, I must accept this parting. Perhaps we will meet again in better worlds than this.
She passed peacefully, love etched upon her face even in death. I will not linger over our grief. What words could capture that endless void, that disbelief when someone so vital is suddenly gone? The mind rebels against such loss, refusing to accept that beloved eyes have closed forever, that familiar voices will speak no more. These are the thoughts that consume the early days of mourning. Yet time presses forward, and grief, though never erased, becomes something we carry instead of something that carries us. Smiles return, though at first they feel like betrayal. Though my mother was gone, life's duties remained. My departure for Ingolstadt was postponed, and my father granted me a few precious weeks at home. It felt wrong to leave our house of mourning so soon, to step back into life's rushing stream. Grief was new to me, and I clung to those who remained, especially Elizabeth, who seemed most in need of comfort. But Elizabeth proved stronger than any of us. She concealed her sorrow and became our household's light, tending to those she called uncle and cousins with quiet devotion. She was never more beautiful than in those dark days, sharing what little sunshine she could find. In comforting us, she seemed to find her own peace. At last, the day of my departure arrived. Henry Clerval spent the evening with us, though he had failed to persuade his practical-minded father to let him study alongside me. His father, a merchant who valued profit above learning, dismissed Henry's scholarly passions as waste. Yet I saw the fire in Henry's eyes as he spoke of it. His determination to break free from the chains of commerce was unshakable. We lingered long into the night, none of us willing to speak the word farewell. When at last it was said, we pretended to seek rest, though each of us lay awake with the same ache of parting. At dawn, when I descended to the waiting carriage, they were all there, my father offering a final blessing, Clerval gripping my hand in one last clasp, and Elizabeth, my dear Elizabeth, fussing over my traveling clothes and making me promise to write often. As the carriage pulled away, I sank into the cushions, my thoughts turning inward. Strange it felt, I who had always been wrapped in the warmth of familiar faces, now setting out alone. At Ingolstadt, I would have to forge new bonds, to guard my own path. My life had been sheltered and peaceful. I shrank from the prospect of strange faces and unknown companions. Elizabeth, my brothers, Henry, these were the faces etched into my heart, worn smooth by years of love. The thought of strangers made me tremble. Yet, as the miles slipped away beneath the wheels, my spirit lifted like morning mist. Knowledge called to me with an irresistible voice. How often had I paced our halls at home, feeling the walls close in, yearning to step into the vast world beyond. That wish was now granted. What folly it would be to turn back. Such thoughts kept me company through the long road to Ingolstadt. At last the city rose before me, its white steeple piercing the sky like a needle of bone. They led me to my rooms, where I passed the evening alone with my restless dreams. The next morning brought duty, delivering letters of introduction, presenting myself to my professors. Fate, or perhaps some darker power that had shadowed me since I left my father's door, guided me first to Professor Krempe, master of natural philosophy. Though coarse in manner, he carried the treasures of science like gems. He questioned me about my studies, and I answered with careless pride, naming the alchemists who had been my masters. His stare turned cold.
Have you truly wasted your time on such nonsense? Every moment spent on those books is lost forever. You've filled your mind with dead systems and worthless names. Good God! What backwater raised you where no one thought to tell you these fantasies you swallow are ancient dust? To find a follower of Albertus Magnus in this age of reason, goodness no, my dear boy, you must begin again entirely anew.
He scribbled out a list of texts on natural philosophy and dismissed me, noting that lectures would begin the following week. His on general principles, alternating with Professor Waldman's on chemistry. I left without disappointment, for I had long suspected the futility of those old masters. Yet neither did I feel drawn to these modern studies. Krempe himself, short, squat, with a harsh voice and a coarse face, did little to recommend his science. Perhaps I am too philosophical in recalling it now, but even as a child I had found modern science wanting. Unguided, I turned backward through time, exchanging fresh discoveries for ancient dreams. The new philosophy seemed so small. Gone were the grand visions of immortality and power. Impossible though they were, those dreams held majesty. What remained now felt mundane, trading infinity for trifles. These thoughts haunted my first days in Ingolstadt as I wandered strange streets and measured unfamiliar faces. When the next week approached, I remembered Krempe's words about the lectures. Though I couldn't bear to hear that smug little man preach, I recalled what he'd said of Waldman, whom I'd never met. Through the arched doorway stepped Waldman, a man the very opposite of his colleague. His temples silvered by 50 winters, his face still lit with kindness, he carried himself with quiet dignity. When he spoke, his voice flowed like honey through the hushed chamber. He traced chemistry's history, each great discoverer's name falling from his lips like a prayer. But it was his praise of modern science that struck me to the core.
The old masters promised the impossible and delivered nothing. Today's scientists are more humble. They know they cannot turn lead into gold or brew immortality. Yet these quiet souls, with dirt-stained hands and eyes bent to their instruments, have unveiled true wonders. They have peered into nature's hidden chambers and watched her secret work. They have mapped the heavens, traced the ceaseless dance of blood, and revealed the invisible air we breathe. They have seized lightning from the sky and learned to shake the earth itself, even to capture shadows of the unseen world.
His words pierced me like arrows of fate, each striking deeper than the last. As he spoke, I felt myself gripped by a vast and nameless force. Every syllable resonated within me until my mind blazed with a single consuming purpose. So much has been discovered, I thought, but I will go further still. Where others have drawn maps, I will forge new paths. I will tear away the final veil and reveal creation's deepest mysteries. That night, sleep fled from me. My thoughts churned like a storm-tossed sea, promising order but delivering only chaos. When at last exhaustion claimed me near dawn, I dreamed fitfully. The morning light washed away the fever of my imaginings, leaving in its place an unshakable resolve. I would return to my abandoned studies and devote myself to the science that now seemed written into my very nature. That same day I visited Professor Waldman. In private, his dignity gave way to genuine warmth. I confessed my past studies, as I had to Krempe, but Waldman's reaction could not have been more different. He smiled at the mention of Agrippa and Paracelsus, showing respect where his colleague had only sneered.
These men laid the foundations of all we know today. Their tireless work, however misguided, rarely failed to benefit mankind in the end.
His humility touched me deeply. I admitted how his lecture had transformed my view of modern chemistry. Though I spoke with care, my heart burned with enthusiasm. When I asked for his guidance in further reading, his face lit with encouragement.
I am delighted to welcome a new student. With your natural gifts, your success will depend only on dedication. Chemistry has made our greatest advances. Hence, I have made it my life's work. But one must not ignore the wider sciences. A chemist ignorant of mathematics or natural philosophy is unworthy of the name. If you truly wish to uncover nature's secrets, you must study all her laws.
He led me through his laboratory, explaining the instruments with patient clarity. He promised me access to his equipment once I had gained sufficient skill not to damage it, and he provided the book list I had requested. As I left, I felt a crushing certainty settle upon me. This day had fixed my destiny, for better or worse.
Chapter 4.
From that moment, the mysteries of natural philosophy, especially chemistry, consumed my every waking thought. I devoured the works of modern scientists with a hunger I had never known, seeking out their lectures and company at the university. Even Professor Krempe, with his harsh manners and coarse appearance, proved a wellspring of knowledge. But in Professor Waldman I found what was most precious, a true mentor. His gentle guidance never felt imposed, and he could make the most complex ideas shine clear as morning light. I lost track of time in my studies, working until dawn spilled across my laboratory table and the stars faded into day. My progress was swift, even alarming. Other students looked on in amazement, and my professors themselves remarked upon it. Krempe would tease me about my former devotion to Agrippa, while Waldman's pride in my work showed plainly in his smile. 2 years slipped away like this, Geneva and my family forgotten in the blaze of my ambition. Those who have never felt science's seduction cannot understand its power. In other fields, one treads paths already worn. In science, each step promises discovery. Even a modest mind, if wholly devoted, may achieve wonders. By the end of those 2 years, I had improved chemical instruments enough to earn notice throughout the university. I thought then that my studies in Ingolstadt were complete, that I might return home. But fate had other plans. I had become obsessed with the mystery of life itself, the human frame, and indeed all living things. What spark animated flesh and bone? It was an ancient question, older than the pyramids, yet I felt we now stood on its threshold, held back only by timidity. I turned to physiology with an almost unnatural fervor. To understand life, I knew I must first comprehend death. Anatomy alone could not suffice. I had to study decay itself. Raised without superstition, I feared no graveyard. To me they held only a solemn poetry, bodies returning to earth. I spent long nights in vaults and charnel houses, watching beauty dissolve into corruption, tracing the transformation of living tissue into dust. Nothing escaped my eye, however revolting to common sensibilities. Through all this, I searched for the thread binding life and death, until at last, like lightning in the dark, it struck me. The solution was elegant, almost absurdly simple, and I could scarcely believe that I alone had found what so many brilliant minds had missed. Let me be plain. These are not the ravings of a madman. What I discovered is as certain as the sun's light in heaven. Each step followed the last by natural consequence, and after exhausting toil I reached it, the secret of generation and life itself. More still, I had learned how to breathe life into lifeless matter. At first I trembled with awe, but wonder soon gave way to a joy so fierce it bordered on delirium. After endless hours bent over my work, I had scaled that impossible summit. The magnitude of my discovery swept away all memory of the path that led me there. I saw only the prize. The greatest minds in history had pursued this secret, and now it lay open before me. It was not like a curtain suddenly drawn aside, but like finding a hidden map that leads to unmarked treasure. I was as a man buried alive who spies, at last, a thin beam of light showing the way to freedom. I see the eager light in your eyes, my friend, the hope, the wonder. You long to know the secret I uncovered, but I cannot share it. Listen to my story, and you will understand why silence is my duty. I will not guide you down the same dark road I once walked, unguarded and burning with ambition. Let my tale teach you what I learned too late. How perilous knowledge can be, and how much happier is the soul content with simple joys than one who strains beyond human bounds. With such terrible power in my grasp, I spent many days debating how to use it. Though I had found the spark of life, fashioning a vessel to contain it, with its labyrinth of muscle and vein, remained a daunting task. At first I considered beginning with something simple, but success had made me bold. Why not attempt the most complex of all forms, man himself? Though my means seemed meager for such ambition, I felt certain I would succeed. I steeled myself for failure, believing even an imperfect result might pave the way for future triumphs. The scale of my design did not deter me, and so I resolved to create a human being. To ease the delicate labor, I determined to make him of giant stature, nearly 8 feet tall. No words can capture the storm of emotions that swept me forward in those first fevered days. Life and death seemed flimsy barriers, waiting only to be torn aside, allowing light to flood a shadowed world. A new species would call me father, creator, source. I imagined them owing me their very existence, bound in gratitude no natural parent could claim. In my wildest visions, I even dreamed of conquering death itself, though that still lay beyond reach. These grand delusions fueled me as I threw myself into the work. My face grew pale from endless nights, my body wasted with solitude and neglect. Again and again I pressed to the edge of success, only to fail, yet hope burned that the next hour, the next day, would bring triumph. This secret mission became my whole world, while the moon watched my midnight labors as I chased nature to her darkest corners. Who can imagine the horrors of that work? I disturbed graves, dissected the newly dead, and tortured living creatures in my hunt for death's secret. Even now my hands tremble at the memory. But then some unstoppable force drove me onward until I lived only for this one aim. Sometimes I woke as from a nightmare, horrified at myself, only to plunge back in with fiercer intensity. I gathered bones from charnel houses, probing with unholy hands the secrets of human flesh. In a solitary workshop, a cramped cell atop the house, cut off from all else by a long gallery, I pursued my dreadful task. My eyes were bulging from the strain of focusing so closely on my work. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse supplied my materials. Often my human heart recoiled in disgust, yet the fire within pushed me past all revulsion. So I pressed on, nearing the completion of my monstrous work. Summer slipped away while I devoted myself, body and soul, to my dreadful labor. Outside my window the fields ripened with golden harvests, the vineyards dripped with fruit, yet I had grown blind to nature's beauty. As I turned from the living world, I also neglected the dear ones far away, whom I had not seen in so long. Their silence haunted me, and my father's words often echoed in my mind.
When you are content with yourself, you think of us with love and right often. Any gap in your letters tells me you are failing in other duties as well.
I knew how my silence must wound him, yet I could not tear myself from the grip of my grotesque work, which had fastened its cold hands upon my imagination. I told myself that once it was finished, I would make amends for the affections I had neglected. At the time, I thought my father unfair, but now I see the wisdom in his concern. A person should preserve peace within, never allowing passion or fleeting desire to disturb the soul's balance. Even the pursuit of knowledge must obey this law. If study weakens love for others, if it steals joy in life's simple pleasures, then learning becomes a poison. Had such wisdom always prevailed, perhaps Greece would still be free, Caesar would have spared Rome, the Americas would have been discovered more gently, and the empires of Mexico and Peru might yet endure. But I wander into philosophy when I should press forward with my tale. Your eager eyes remind me to continue. My father never reproached me in his letters, though he asked more carefully about my studies. Meanwhile, the seasons turned, winter, spring, summer, as I labored on. Once I had delighted in every blossom and unfurling leaf. Now I saw nothing but the shape of my creation. The leaves browned and fell before my work neared its end, yet each day brought me closer to success. Still, triumph tasted bitter. I felt less like an artist at work than a condemned man toiling in a poisoned mine. Fever burned through me by night, my nerves frayed until the fall of a leaf could make me start. I avoided people as if I bore some dreadful guilt. At times I glimpsed what I had become and recoiled in horror, but always my burning purpose dragged me onward. Soon, I told myself, it would end. Then I would heal my body with exercise, restore my spirit with simple pleasures. Yes, all this I promised myself, once my creation drew breath.
Chapter 5.
On that gloomy November night, I at last beheld my greatest work stir with life. My hands trembled as I arranged the instruments, ready to spark motion into the still form at my feet. The clock had just struck 1. Rain drummed against the windows like mournful fingers. As my candle guttered low, I saw it, the dull yellow eye open, followed by ragged breaths and convulsive limbs. How can I describe what I felt in that instant, or the creature I had fashioned so carefully? I had chosen each feature for beauty, flowing black hair, pearly white teeth. Yet all was wrong. His yellow skin scarcely concealed the muscles and veins beneath. Those watery eyes stared from hollow sockets, his black lips twitched around his teeth, and when he opened his jaws, muttering inarticulate sounds, a ghastly grin wrinkled his cheeks. Life shifts in strange ways, but nothing turns more swiftly than the human heart. For 2 years I had exhausted myself in labor, dreaming only of giving life to lifeless clay. But at the moment of success, the dream shattered. Horror filled my chest. I could not bear the sight of what I had made. I fled the chamber, pacing my bedroom for hours, too shaken to rest. At last, overcome with fatigue, I collapsed fully dressed upon my bed, desperate for peace. Instead, sleep brought nightmares. I dreamed of Elizabeth, radiant in the streets of Ingolstadt. But when I kissed her, death crept across her face, and she became my mother's corpse, shrouded and crawling with worms. I woke in terror, drenched in sweat, teeth chattering, and there he stood. Moonlight filtered through the shutters as my creation held back the bed curtain. His eyes, if eyes they could be called, fixed upon me. He reached out a hand, muttering almost words, his lips pulled in that dreadful grin. I ran. All night I wandered the courtyard in circles, starting at every sound. Each noise seemed to be him, that thing I had brought to life, that horror no human should ever face. Even unfinished, he had been terrible. In motion, he was beyond imagination. The night passed in waves of terror. My heart at times raced so violently I felt each pulse. At others, I nearly collapsed from weakness. My beautiful dream had become a nightmare so quickly, so utterly. When dawn broke gray and wet, I watched through heavy eyes as the church bell tolled 6. The porter opened the gates and I rushed into the streets, moving quickly, afraid my creation lurked around every corner. I could not return to my rooms. Instead, I pressed on through the rain beneath the darkening skies. I walked without aim, hoping to exhaust my terror through motion. My feet carried me along streets I scarcely saw, my heart hammering as if I were pursued. I hurried forward like a man on a lonely road, too afraid to look back, certain some dreadful thing followed close behind. Through the echoing streets I wandered, footsteps striking against cold stone, until fate halted me before the coaching inn. There, as though summoned by unseen providence, I stood transfixed by the arrival of a carriage. The Swiss diligence rolled to a stop, and from its depths stepped a familiar face. Henry Clerval, his eyes alight with recognition.
My dear Frankenstein, what fortune to find you here at this very moment.
The sight of him swept through me like a cleansing wind, carrying with it memories of home, my father's kindness, Elizabeth's steady warmth. When I clasped his hand, the horrors of the night seemed to melt like frost beneath the sun, and for an instant peace returned to me. We turned toward my college, Henry speaking with the cheerful eagerness of one newly freed.
You can imagine how hard it was to persuade my father that life held more promise than ledgers and accounts. Until the very end, he argued, like the Dutch schoolmaster. I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek. I eat heartily without Greek. But love prevailed over practicality, and here I am at last, in this land of learning.
It fills my heart to see you, I answered softly. Tell me of home, of my father, my brothers, Elizabeth.
They are well, though they miss your letters. But Frankenstein, You look haunted, as if you have not slept in days.
You see too clearly. I have been consumed by work, but now I pray it is finished. My words trembled in the air between us. The memory of the night's horrors pressed so heavily upon me that my steps quickened as we neared the college. A new terror seized me. What if the creature still lurked in my rooms? I could not let Henry see. At the stairs, I made some excuse and hurried on ahead, my heart hammering like a drum against my ribs. I flung open my chamber door like a child expecting shadows to spring to life. But the room stood empty, blessedly empty. Relief poured over me, cool and sweet as summer rain. When Henry joined me at breakfast, I could not contain the frenzy of my deliverance. I moved like a man possessed, laughing, speaking with wild gaiety, my nerves strung tight as wires. Hysteria crept into my voice until I scarcely recognized it. Henry watched with deepening concern.
Victor, what darkness haunts you?
But I could only press my hands to my eyes as phantom shapes danced at the edges of my vision. "Save me," I cried, before the world went black and I fell into fever's embrace. Poor, steadfast Henry. Our joyful reunion turned to sorrow as he became my sole guardian through the long months that followed. He shielded my family from worry, never letting them know how close I had drifted to the abyss. Patient and tireless, he was my anchor to life itself, drawing me back inch by inch from the brink of madness. The illness that seized me was no common fever. Without Henry's constant watch, I do not think I would have returned to the world of the living. In my delirium, the creature's hideous form haunted every thought, and I babbled endlessly of him. At first, Henry dismissed my ravings as fever dreams, but as I returned again and again to the same dreadful tale, his face grew troubled, sensing some deeper horror lay beneath my sickness. Recovery came slowly, like winter yielding at last to spring. Each sign of improvement was followed by a relapse that clouded Henry's gentle brow with worry. Then one morning, as I raised myself weakly to the window, I saw the bare branches tipped with tender green. That divine spring worked its magic upon my broken spirit. As the world awoke from its long sleep, so too did my heart begin to remember joy. The crushing darkness lifted, and I felt myself returning to the man I had been before my cursed ambition consumed me. "My dearest friend," I said to Henry, my voice thick with emotion, "you have given up your whole winter to watch over me instead of pursuing your studies. How can I ever repay you? I feel guilty for ruining your plans, though I know you will forgive me, won't you?"
The only repayment I want is to see you whole again. And since you seem stronger today, perhaps I might mention something.
A shiver crept over me. What subject could he mean? Surely not that, not the horror I dared not name, not even in thought. Henry caught my unease at once and soothed me.
Peace, my friend. If it troubles you, let it pass. I only meant this. Your father and Elizabeth grow anxious over your silence. They do not know how ill you have been. A letter in your hand would set their hearts at rest.
Relief swept through me so suddenly I almost laughed. "Is that all? My dear Henry, how could you think my thoughts would not fly first to those I love most dearly?"
If that is truly so, then you will be glad to hear this. A letter awaits you. From Elizabeth, no less.
Chapter 6.
Clerval handed me a letter, the handwriting instantly recognizable as Elizabeth's.
My dearest Victor, even Henry's faithful letters cannot quiet my fears, though they say you've been too ill to write. Just one word in your own hand would calm our anxious hearts. Each day I wait for news, holding Uncle back from making the long, dangerous journey to Ingolstadt himself. The thought of you lying helpless in the care of strangers, nurses who could never know your gentle ways, has haunted my dreams. But Henry writes you are recovering. Please let it be true. Come home to us, dear cousin. Here you'll find warmth and love, and faces glowing with joy at your return. Your father stands strong and well. His only shadow is your absence. And Ernest. How he's grown. At 16 he burns with energy and longs to serve as a soldier in foreign lands. We hold him back, at least until your return. But he lacks your love of study. He'd rather climb mountains and sail our lakes than bend over books. I fear we must one day yield to his wishes, lest his spirit wither. Life here remains much as you left it. The blue waters still mirror the snow-capped peaks above them, eternal as our love for you. My simple daily tasks fill the hours, made sweet by the kind faces around me. Only one change has touched our household. Do you remember Justine Moritz? Let me tell you her story. Her mother, widowed with 4 children, could never love her as her father had. After his death, poor Justine suffered until my aunt, seeing her misery, brought her into our home at 12 years old. In Geneva, where our Republican ways softened the distinctions between classes, she found at last a true home. You always favoured her, Victor. Remember how you said one glimpse of her bright smile could banish your darkest mood. My aunt grew to love her deeply and gave her an education beyond her station, which Justine repaid with tireless devotion. Though she never said it, her eyes shone with adoration for her benefactress. She studied my aunt's every gesture, trying to mirror her grace. Even now she reminds me so much of that dear lady. When my aunt died, we were too lost in grief to notice Justine's silent sorrow, though she had watched the sickbed with such tender care. Poor Justine fell ill herself soon after, but fate had more trials in store for her. One by one, Justine watched her siblings slip into death's embrace, until her mother stood alone with the child she had spurned, guilt pressed down on her like a millstone. Being devoutly Catholic, she saw each loss as heaven's punishment for her cruel favoritism, and her confessor, I fear, only deepened these grim beliefs. Shortly after you left for Ingolstadt, Madame Moritz summoned Justine home. Oh, how she wept to leave us! Her once lively spirit had already softened under grief, but home brought no comfort. Her mother veered wildly between begging forgiveness and flinging accusations, insisting Justine had somehow caused her siblings' deaths. This relentless torment broke her strength. She declined swiftly, her bitterness growing until winter's first chill carried her away. Now Justine has returned to us, and I cherish her more than ever. She has grown into a woman of rare grace and cleverness, her gentle manner reminding me so sweetly of our beloved aunt. I must tell you of little William, dear cousin. How I wish you could see him. He's taller than most children his age, with eyes like summer skies and dark curls that frame his face. His smile sets deep dimples in his rosy cheeks, and already he's a little romantic. He has several sweethearts, though young Louisa Byron seems to hold his heart most firmly. And for the whispers of Geneva that might amuse you, the lovely Miss Mansfield will soon wed an English gentleman, John Melbourne. Her sister Manon, though not blessed with beauty, secured the wealthy banker Duvillard last autumn. Your dear friend Louis Manoir, though lately shadowed by misfortune, has found joy again in courting Madame Tavernier, a charming widow somewhat older but adored by all who know her. Writing to you has lifted my spirits, though sadness creeps back as I close. Please, Victor, even a single word would ease our worried hearts. We are endlessly grateful for Henry's kindness and faithful letters. Take care, dearest cousin, and I beg you, write to us soon. Elizabeth Lavenza, Geneva, March 18th.
Beloved Elizabeth, I whispered, clutching her letter, I must write at once and calm their fears. Though the effort drained me, I composed my reply as my strength slowly returned. 2 weeks later, I finally emerged from my chamber's isolation. My first duty was to present Clerval to my professors, though each introduction reopened wounds still raw. Since that dreadful night when my work bore such dark fruit, even the word philosophy struck terror in me. Henry, seeing how the sight of chemical instruments set off my trembling fits, had quietly cleared away my equipment and moved me into new quarters, far from the haunted rooms of my old laboratory. Yet his protection faltered before the professor's well-meaning praise. Monsieur Waldman's kind words about my scientific progress felt like gentle poison. He noticed my unease and, misreading its cause, tried steering our talks toward broad principles of science, hoping to encourage me. What could I do? His every kindness twisted like a knife. Each phrase conjured images of tools and engines that would one day deliver my slow undoing. I writhed inwardly, but dared not reveal my torment. Clerval, ever sensitive to hidden pain, carried the conversation away by pleading his ignorance in such matters. My heart swelled with gratitude, though I said nothing. He must have suspected more than he let on, yet he never pressed me. For all my boundless affection for him, I couldn't speak that terrible memory aloud. I feared words would carve it deeper into my soul. Professor Kremper was less delicate. His praise landed like blows.
Damn it all! This young man has surpassed us all. Look, if you must, but it's true. Imagine, a boy who once drank Agrippa's nonsense now stands at the head of this university. If someone doesn't check him soon, we'll all be left in the shadows.
He caught my expression and laughed.
Ah, modesty, fine in youth, but you'll outgrow it as I did.
Mercifully, he soon launched into stories of his own greatness, sparing me further torment. Henry, unlike me, had never cared for natural science. His heart belonged to literature, and he had come to Ingolstadt to master the Eastern tongues, dreaming of adventure in distant lands. Persian, Arabic, and Sanskrit called to his imagination, promising a world beyond mountains and seas. I joined him gladly, desperate to flee my haunted reflections. Where idleness once drove me mad, I now found refuge as his fellow student. I read not for mastery, as Henry did, but for solace, and how richly I was rewarded. The Eastern poets gave me melancholy that soothed, joy that lifted, images of life as a radiant sun, a garden of roses, the smile of a beautiful adversary, the fire alive in one's own heart. How different from the bold, cold heroes of classical verse. Summer slipped away in these gentle pursuits. I had planned to return to Geneva in late autumn, but accidents and impassable winter roads delayed me until spring. The wait pained me. I longed for home and those I loved, yet I couldn't abandon Henry in this strange place before he'd found his footing. So we passed the winter cheerfully enough, and though spring came late, its beauty made us forget the long wait. By May, I watched daily for letters fixing my departure date. Henry proposed we tour the countryside around Ingolstadt on foot, so I might bid a proper farewell to these lands. I agreed eagerly. I had always loved such rambles, especially with him beside me. For 2 weeks we wandered together. My health, long since restored, now grew stronger still in the fresh air, surrounded by nature's quiet gifts and Henry's warm companionship. My studies had once made me cold and solitary, but Henry awakened my better nature, teaching me again to delight in children's laughter, in wildflowers, in the play of sunlight across a meadow. Dear friend, how purely you loved me, how patiently you lifted my thoughts until they matched your own. My selfish pursuits had twisted my spirit, but your kindness melted that frost and returned me to the joyful being I had once been. Even the simplest things, a clear sky, a green field, filled me with a happiness so pure it astonished me. Spring flowers dotted the hedgerows, summer buds unfurled, and for once the shadows haunting me all year fell silent. Henry rejoiced in my renewal, taking as much pleasure in my joy as in his own. He worked tirelessly to entertain me, revealing the richness of his imagination. Like the Eastern poets he admired, he spun tales of wonder and passion. Sometimes he recited verses that had once been my favorites. Sometimes he drew me into spirited debate, where his wit shone bright. We returned to Ingolstadt one Sunday afternoon, passing dancers in the streets, laughter echoing in the air. The whole city seemed alive with joy. My own heart soared, light as if unchained, and I moved with a freedom I had almost forgotten I possessed.
Chapter 7.
Upon returning, I found a letter from my father, its pages heavy with sorrow.
My dearest Victor, you have waited so long for me to fix a date for your return. At first, I wished only to write a few lines to say when we would welcome you home, but how cruel it would be to let you come expecting joy only to be met with tears. Even now, I know your eyes are racing across this page, searching for the dreadful words that must come. William is dead, our sweet child murdered. The thought freezes me as I write. I will tell you simply what happened. Last Thursday I walked with Elizabeth and your brothers in Plainpalais. The evening was warm and calm, and we let the dusk fall around us before turning back. William and Ernest had run ahead. Ernest returned alone, saying William had hidden himself and never came back. Alarmed, we searched until night, then hurried home, hoping he had gone before us. The empty house deepened our fear. So again we went out, torches in hand, scouring the fields until near dawn. At last I found him, our bright boy, now still upon the grass, the cruel mark of murder on his throat. We carried him home. My face betrayed the truth before Elizabeth, who insisted on seeing him. She examined his neck, then cried out in anguish, "Oh God, I have murdered my darling child," and fell fainting. When we revived her, she confessed that William had begged her to let him wear a precious miniature of your mother that evening. It is gone, no doubt the thief's temptation and the cause of his death. We have searched for the killer in vain. Nothing can restore our beloved William. Come, Victor, Elizabeth needs you. She weeps without ceasing and blames herself as the cause of his death. Her words pierce me deeper than any knife. We are all undone, yet your presence might console us. Thank heaven, your mother did not live to see this misery. Enter this house of mourning, not with vengeance, but with the gentleness that heals the wounds of those who love you. Your affectionate and afflicted father, Alphonse Frankenstein, Geneva, May 12th.
Clerval watched as joy drained from my face and turned to horror. I cast the letter aside and buried my head in my hands. The room itself seemed to darken around me.
My dear Frankenstein, what new shadow has fallen across your path?
I thrust the letter toward him, pacing like a caged animal while he read. Soon tears welled in his own eyes.
There are no words for such grief. What will you do?
Go to Geneva at once. Come with me, Henry. We must arrange for horses. As we hurried through the streets, Clerval tried to comfort me.
Poor William. Sweet child, now at peace with his mother. Who could look upon such innocent beauty and not weep at its loss? To die so cruelly, and yet his suffering is over. The earth holds him gently now, and pain can touch him no more. Our pity must be saved for those left behind in this darkened world.
His words echoed faintly in my mind, though I scarcely heard them then. The moment the horses were ready, I leapt into a waiting cabriolet and bid my loyal friend farewell. The road home filled me with a creeping melancholy. At first I thought only of rushing forward, of comforting those who mourned. But as the familiar landscape drew nearer, I slowed, uneasy. 6 years had passed since I had last walked those paths, and time changes everything, sometimes swiftly, cruelly, sometimes with slow but no less relentless force. Vague fears gripped me, nameless yet heavy. I lingered 2 days in Lausanne, my heart undecided. The lake stretched before me, still and knowing, while nature's vast palace surrounded me. Mountains crowned with eternal snow, shining as they had since my childhood. Gradually, their calm grandeur softened my turmoil until I found strength again to move toward Geneva. The road wound along the narrowing lake, revealing Jura's dark slopes and Mont Blanc's brilliant peak. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Oh, my beloved mountains, my precious lake, how do you greet your lost child? You rise clear against heaven while the waters lie peaceful and blue. Do you promise comfort, or mock my sorrow? Forgive me if I linger on these moments, but they remain sweet in memory. My homeland, only one born to her shores can truly understand the joy of seeing again her streams, her peaks, and dearest of all, her shining lake. But as night fell and home drew closer, dread crept back into my heart. The mountains faded into shadow, and with them went my courage. Everything seemed touched by darkness, and I felt that fate had marked me for misery. How right I was, though even my darkest fears fell short of the anguish that awaited me. Geneva's gates were sealed when I arrived, forcing me to spend the night in nearby Secheron. Under the vast sky, sleep eluded me. Restless, I resolved to visit the place where William had been taken from us. Unable to pass through town, I crossed the lake by boat toward Plain Palais. Lightning leapt around Mont Blanc's peak as I rode, nature's terrible beauty laid bare. From a low hill I watched the storm gather. The rain began with a whisper, then fell in torrents. Thunder crashed above me, echoing between Salive, the Jura, and the Savoy Alps, while each lightning bolt transformed the lake into a sheet of liquid fire. Every flash blinded me before my eyes could readjust to the blackness. As often happens in Switzerland, the storm seemed to rage everywhere at once. Its fiercest fury hung over the water between Bellerive and Coppet, while paler flashes danced along Jura's slopes, and in the east the peaked Mola showed itself only to vanish again behind clouds. As I stood in awe of this dreadful display, my steps carried me onward. The noble war in the heavens lifted my spirit, and I raised my hands to the storm. "William, sweet angel," I cried, "this is your funeral song." No sooner had the words left my lips than I saw a shape shifting behind the trees. I froze. When lightning tore the sky, it revealed him plainly. That massive frame, that face more hideous than humanity allows. It was him, my creation, my monster. My blood ran cold as the thought struck like a blow. Could this demon I had made be William's murderer? The instant the idea took form, conviction followed. My teeth chattered. I leaned against a tree for support. The figure passed swiftly before me and melted into the gloom. Nothing in human shape could have destroyed so innocent a child. It was he. He was the murderer. I longed to pursue him, but the effort would have been hopeless. Another flash showed him climbing the sheer face of Mont Salève with superhuman speed until he vanished over the summit. I stood motionless as the thunder rolled away, rain still lashing around me. In that darkness, memories I had tried to bury surged back. The night of his creation, the horror of his first awakening, his disappearance. 2 years had passed since then. Was this his first act of violence? Almighty God, I had unleashed a being who delighted in death. He had murdered my brother. The anguish of that night is beyond description. I remained there, soaked and trembling, scarcely feeling the cold, my mind consumed by the monster I had cast into the world. He was like my own dark spirit escaped from the grave, determined to destroy all I loved. When dawn finally broke, I made my way back to town. At first, I thought to tell everyone what I knew of the murderer, but I stopped myself. How could I explain that a creature I had created, a being I had given life, had met me at midnight on an impossible mountain? I remembered my fever after the creation. Any tale I told would sound like madness. And even if they believed me, what good would pursuit do? Who could catch something that could climb sheer cliff faces as easily as walking? I entered my father's house around 5 in the morning, telling the servants not to wake anyone. In the library, I waited for the family to rise, surrounded by memories. 6 years had passed like a dream since I'd last stood in this room, embracing my father before leaving for Ingolstadt. At least he was still with me. I studied my mother's portrait above the mantel, Caroline Beaufort kneeling by her father's coffin, her face pale but beautiful even in despair. Below it hung William's miniature, and tears filled my eyes. Ernest found me there.
Victor, I wish you'd come 3 months ago. We were all so happy then. Now you've returned to share our misery. But perhaps you can help Father. He's drowning in grief. And maybe you can convince Elizabeth to stop blaming herself. Poor William, he was our joy, our pride.
My brother's tears flowed freely, and a wave of anguish washed over me. Before, I had only imagined my family's suffering. Now its reality struck me like a physical blow. I tried to comfort Ernest while asking about our father and Elizabeth.
Elizabeth needs you most. She blames herself for William's death. But now that they've found the murderer...
They found the murderer. Dear God, how can that be? My voice trembled with wild desperation. No one could catch him. You might as well try to capture the wind or hold back a mountain stream with a blade of grass. I saw him just last night, running free beneath the stars.
I don't understand what you mean, brother. But for us, this discovery only deepens our misery. No one wanted to believe it at first. Even now, Elizabeth refuses to accept it, despite all we've found. Who could imagine sweet Justine Moritz, who loved our family so dearly, capable of such a dark and terrible deed?
Justine? Poor, gentle Justine. The name fell from my lips like a prayer. But surely you know she's innocent. No one could truly believe she did this. Could they, Ernest?
At first, none of us did. But then evidence began to surface, casting shadows we couldn't ignore. Her behavior has been so strange, so confused. It only adds weight to the facts before us. They're trying her today. You'll hear everything then.
He went on to tell a tale that froze my very blood. On the morning they discovered William's body, Justine had fallen ill, taking to her bed for days. During that time, a servant examining her clothes found something dreadful, the miniature portrait of my mother, the very keepsake that had lured my brother to his death. Without speaking to the family, they carried it straight to a magistrate. When confronted, Justine faltered, her confusion taken as proof of guilt. "You're all mistaken," I cried, my heart heavy with terrible certainty. "I know who killed him. Justine, dear, gentle Justine, is innocent." At that moment my father entered, grief carved deep into his face. He tried to greet me warmly, to lift us from our sorrow, but Ernest blurted out,
Father, Victor says he knows who killed William.
As do we,
my father replied, his voice hollow.
though I would rather have remained ignorant than learn such darkness could dwell in one we trusted.
Father, no. Justine is blameless. He placed a weary hand on my shoulder.
If that is true, God forbid she should suffer wrongly. The trial begins today, and I pray with all my heart she will be cleared.
His words quieted me outwardly, though inside the truth burned like fever. I knew, beyond doubt, that Justine, and indeed any human hand, was innocent. Yet how could I speak the unspeakable? Who would believe me if I named my own creation as the murderer? They would call it madness. Only I, its maker, could know such a monster existed. Elizabeth entered then, more beautiful than memory itself. The playful charm of her youth had ripened into something deeper, a radiance born of sorrow and spirit entwined. She embraced me with desperate hope.
Cousin, your return gives me strength. Perhaps you can help prove Justine's innocence. If they condemn her, then none of us are safe. I trust her as I trust myself. This misfortune is doubled. We've lost William, and now they would take Justine to a fate more cruel still. But they cannot. They will not. When she is freed, I will find joy again, even in William's shadow.
She is innocent, Elizabeth, I swore, though the words stung with the knowledge I could not share. We will prove it. Take heart. She must be acquitted.
Bless you. Everyone else believes her guilty, and it crushed my spirit. I knew it couldn't be true, but the hatred in their eyes made me doubt everything.
Dry your tears, dearest niece,
my father said softly.
If she is innocent as you believe, then trust in justice. I will see that not even a shadow of unfairness touches this trial.
Chapter 8.
The hours dragged by until 11, when under a leaden sky we made our way to the courthouse. My father and the family came as witnesses. I followed with a heart crushed beneath a secret too dark to share. What cruel parody of justice was this, where I alone knew the truth? My reckless pursuit of knowledge had led us here, where 2 lives lay ruined. William, lost forever, and Justine, poised to follow him. I would have confessed it all had confession been possible, but who would believe such madness, that I had shaped the murderer with my own hands? Justine entered the court dressed in mourning black, her beauty sharpened by grief into something solemn and pure. Though hundreds of eyes turned on her with suspicion and hatred, she bore their weight with quiet dignity. Yet I saw the tremor in her hands, the way her composure was a mask stretched thin. When she noticed us in the gallery, a tear slipped down her cheek before she mastered herself and offered us a smile so gentle it broke my heart. The prosecution's case rose piece by piece, each fact laid like a stone in her tomb. She had been seen wandering alone on the night of William's death, near the place where his body was later found. A market woman recalled her confusion, her strange manner. At home, she had asked after William with desperate urgency, only to fall into hysterics when she saw his corpse. And then came the damning proof. Elizabeth herself, trembling, confirmed that the miniature found in Justine's pocket was the very portrait she had entrusted to William. A shudder swept through the courtroom as whispers of horror filled the air. When at last Justine was called to speak, her composure faltered. Terror flickered in her eyes, despair broke across her face, but when she found her voice, it rang with a clear simplicity.
God knows I am innocent. I do not expect my word alone to save me. I can only tell the truth plainly, and trust my life to your justice.
She told her story, how she had visited her aunt in Shane that evening, and when she heard of William's disappearance, had joined the search. Finding the city gates closed, she had sheltered in a barn through the long night, watching for dawn. If she had passed near the place of his death, she swore she had not known. As for the portrait found in her pocket, she could not account for it. That mystery weighed on her as heavily as on her accusers.
I know the evidence weighs heavy against me, but I cannot explain what I do not understand. I have no enemies who would seek to ruin me so cruelly. Did the true murderer plant this portrait upon me? I cannot say how, nor why they would steal only to discard it so quickly. I place my fate in your hands. Though I see little hope, I beg you, call those who know my character. If their voices cannot outweigh these shadows of guilt, then I must submit to my fate. Yet I swear upon my soul, I am innocent.
Witnesses came forward, speaking of her kindness and devotion, but their voices faltered under the court's suspicion. Their praise fell like snow, momentarily bright, yet melting at once upon the heat of prejudice. Then Elizabeth rose. Her face was pale but resolute, her voice carrying clear across the chamber.
I am cousin to the murdered child, or rather his sister. for I have lived in his family since before his birth. Perhaps I ought to remain silent, but I cannot see an innocent perish while those who know her heart are cowed into silence. I have shared a home with Justine for many years. I have seen nothing in her but gentleness and light. She nursed my aunt in her final illness with unwearied devotion, and afterward tended her own mother with the same fidelity. She loved William as though he were her own brother. I staked my word on her innocence. As for the portrait, had she but asked, I would have placed it in her hands myself. Such is my trust in her.
A murmur ran through the gallery. Admiration for Elizabeth's courage, not belief in the innocence of Justine. The tide of suspicion had already turned. To many, Elizabeth's words seemed the blind loyalty of family rather than a defense rooted in truth. Justine wept silently, offering no reply. My own heart raged within me. I knew her blameless, but had not the same fiend who murdered William now contrived this cruel mockery, casting suspicion on her to deepen my torment? The thought was unendurable. I fled the court in anguish. Her suffering was sharp, but she bore it with innocence to sustain her. Mine was worse, guilt without end, gnawing ceaselessly at my soul. That night I found no rest. When morning came, I returned with parched lips and a trembling heart. I could not bring myself to ask, but the officer at the door read my face. His words were few, but they sealed my despair.
All ballots were black. She is condemned.
No words can describe the despair that gripped me then. The officer, with a shrug, added,
She has confessed. We hardly needed it. The evidence was strong enough, but the judges are satisfied. None like to condemn on circumstance alone.
This revelation shook me to my core. Could she truly have spoken such words, or had the weight of fear and isolation broken her spirit? My thoughts swirled in confusion, and I felt madness creeping at the edges of my reason. What chance had I if I dared to speak the truth of the real murderer, but to be branded insane? I returned home, where Elizabeth waited, her eyes pleading for some glimmer of hope. It ended as you feared, I said bitterly. The court would rather see 10 innocents perish than risk one guilty man's escape. And worse still, she has confessed. Elizabeth's strength crumbled at once.
How can I believe in goodness again? Justine, whom I loved as a sister, could those gentle eyes have hidden such darkness all along?
Yet even as she spoke, the summons came. Justine wished to see Elizabeth before the end. My father left the decision to her.
I will go. Guilty though they say she is, I cannot abandon her now. Victor, come with me. I cannot face this alone.
And so, though the thought was agony, I went with her. In the prison's dim cell, we found Justine lying upon her bed of straw, her hands bound with chains. At the sight of us, she rose like a wounded bird, then sank at Elizabeth's feet, weeping. Elizabeth fell to her knees beside her, their tears mingling in the shadows.
Oh, Justine, why take from me my last comfort? I clung to your innocence like a lifeline. Now my heart breaks more than ever.
Do you truly think I could be so wicked? Have you joined those who would crush me and call me murderer?
Stand up, dear one. If you are innocent, why kneel? I am not your enemy. I believed in you through everything, until they told me you confessed. Tell me that is not true, and I will trust you still.
I did confess, but it was a lie that weighs upon me more than any sin. God forgive me. The priest tormented me until I doubted my own mind. He threatened me with hell and eternal damnation if I did not speak as they demanded. I had no one to turn to. Every eye already saw me condemned. What choice remained? In a moment of weakness, I told them what they wanted to hear. Now I am lost.
She paused, tears streaming down her face.
It rends my heart to think you could doubt your Justine, the one your aunt loved, the one you cherished. Yet for William, I go to him now. I shall see him in heaven, where there is no suffering. That thought alone comforts me as I meet my shame.
Oh, Justine, forgive my doubt. Why did you confess? Do not despair. I will not let you go quietly. I will plead for you. I will soften their hearts with prayer and tears. You cannot die. You are my friend, my sister. I cannot lose you to the scaffold.
Death does not frighten me as it once did. That fear has left me. God gives me strength for what is to come. If you remember me as wrongly condemned, I shall face death with peace. Learn from me, dear lady. Accept God's will with a calm heart.
I had retreated to a dark corner, hiding my torment. Despair. What did they know of it? Tomorrow she would pass from life to death, and yet my suffering ran deeper still. My teeth ground together. A low, agonized groan escaped me. Startled, Justine turned. Seeing me, she rose and came over.
Kind sir, you still visit me? Surely you do not think me guilty.
Words failed me. Elizabeth spoke for me instead.
No, Justine. He believes in your innocence more than I did, even after hearing of your confession.
I am so grateful.
She found for a while the comfort she sought, but I, who bore the true guilt, felt an eternal worm gnawing at my heart, leaving no room for solace. Elizabeth's tears were pure and innocent, like clouds that pass before the moon, softening its light but never staining it. Mine were of a different tint, a fire that burned without hope. We stayed until Elizabeth could barely tear herself away. Justine forced a gentle smile through her tears and embraced Elizabeth one last time.
Farewell, dearest friend. May heaven bless and keep you. Let this be your last sorrow. Live well, be happy, and spread your light to others.
The next day she died. Elizabeth's pleadings fell upon ears hardened by law. The judges would not be moved. My own desperate entreaties availed me nothing. Confronted with their cold reasoning, my confession choked in my throat. I could have proclaimed myself mad, declared any tale that might have spared her, but who would have believed? I could not save her. She went to the scaffold a condemned woman. I turned then to watch Elizabeth in her silent suffering. This grief, too, was my doing. My father mourned. Our home, once bright with joy, was now shrouded in sorrow. All that wept were loved ones made miserable by my hands. I knew with a crushing certainty that these tears were not the last. Other bells would toll, other cries would echo through our halls. Oh, how bitter the irony, that I, Victor Frankenstein, their son and friend, who would gladly spill every drop of blood in my veins for their happiness, who finds joy only in their smiles, who would fill their lives with blessings. I am the one who condemns them to this endless sorrow. If their tears could satisfy the inexorable doom I have set in motion, I would welcome them. If only their suffering could end here, before the peace of death claims them as it claimed William and Justine. These dark thoughts haunted me as I watched my family mourn at the graves of William and Justine, the first innocent souls sacrificed to my terrible ambition. They were merely the beginning, and that knowledge weighed upon me like a mountain of ice.
Chapter 9.
There is no torment like the stillness that follows a storm of tragedy, when the rush of terrible events finally subsides, leaving only grim certainty behind. The mind is stripped of both hope and dread. Justine lay at peace in death. I alone remained cursed with life. Blood still ran through my veins, but my heart lay crushed beneath a guilt no balm could lift. Sleep abandoned me. I paced the house like a haunted thing, haunted by the knowledge that the horrors I had unleashed were only the beginning. How strange that my heart still longed for goodness, even as it drowned in remorse. I had begun with noble aims, to serve mankind, and now everything lay in ruins. Where once I could look back with pride, I now sank into a remorse so deep words scarcely touch it. My health withered beneath that load, and never fully recovered from the first shock. I could not bear another person's face. Every laugh, every smile felt like a blade. Only in absolute solitude did I find anything like relief, the deep, dark hush of being utterly alone. My father watched my decline with mounting anxiety. He tried to rouse me with the steady wisdom of a clear conscience.
Don't you see, Victor, I suffer too. I loved William more than life, but we owe it to those who remain to keep our sorrow in check. Too much despair kills all chance of purpose. Without purpose, how can anyone truly live?
His counsel was right as counsel can be, but it could not reach the particular poison that ate at me. Had guilt and terror not corrupted every feeling, I might have hidden my pain to spare them. Instead, I answered only with wild, pleading eyes and withdrew once more. We moved to Bellerive about then, and the change brought a small mercy. In Geneva, the town gates and the locked lake felt like prison walls. At Bellerive, I was free. When the household slept, I would slip out in our boat and drift for hours, sometimes letting the wind take me, sometimes rowing to the middle of the lake and floating, lost in misery. In those silent hours, accompanied only by bats and distant frogs, I often pictured letting the water close over me and end it all. Yet thoughts of Elizabeth, so linked to my life and of my father and Ernest, always stayed my hand. How could I abandon them to the monster I had set loose? Those thoughts drove me to bitter tears and a desperate craving for peace to ease their burdens. But peace would not come. Guilt had killed every hope. I had created horrors that could not be undone, and each new day brought a fresh dread of what my creature might yet do. A conviction settled in me that he was not finished, that some greater outrage lay ahead. As long as I had people to love, I had reason to fear. My hatred for that fiend burned beyond reason. The thought of him set my teeth on edge. My eyes flashed with a blind desire to snuff out the life I had given. I would have scaled the highest peak to hurl him from it. I longed to see him again, not to speak, but to pour out my hatred and avenge William and Justine. Our house became a place of shadows. The horror of recent events had broken my father's health. Elizabeth, once so radiant, moved through her days in a fog of sorrow. She abandoned her pastimes, convinced that any joy would dishonor the dead. In her mind, endless grief seemed the only fitting tribute to such ruined innocence. The bright girl who once walked with me by the lake, dreaming of a future, was gone. The first true sorrow had come, and it had dimmed her smile. Her voice trembled as she spoke, eyes fixed on some far grief.
Dear cousin, since Justine has gone, I see the world differently. Once the tales of injustice in books seemed distant, things that happened to others. Now darkness has crept into our own home, and I see how men can become monsters. Yet perhaps I am harsh. Everyone believed Justine guilty. If she was truly guilty, then she would be a creature of unspeakable wickedness. But I know she was innocent, and you know it too. When lies can wear truth's face, who can ever feel safe?
Her words cut me like knives, for I alone knew the terrible fact she named only in fear. Elizabeth saw my anguish and took my hand, her touch gentle as morning light. Her sweetness washed over me, and I drew close, terrified that my creation might step from the shadows and take her from me. But not even Elizabeth's love could lift the black cloud that clung to my soul. I was like a wounded deer, slipping into the forest to stare at the arrow in its side, waiting for death. Sometimes I bore my despair in silence. More often it drove me to frantic motion. In one such frenzy, I fled toward the alpine valleys, hoping their immutable grandeur would blunt the edge of my human grief. I turned toward Chamonix, a place I had loved as a boy. 6 years had passed since then. I was broken, but the wild peaks remained unchanged. I began the journey on horseback, later swapping to a sure-footed mule for the treacherous mountain tracks. August weather favored me, though my heart kept its own cruel calendar. 2 months since Justine's death, the hour my world had truly fractured. As I pressed into the Arves ravine, the burden on my spirit eased a little. Towering mountains leaned over the valley, the river tore through ancient rock, and waterfalls thundered their eternal song. Here was a force that rivaled the handiwork of gods, and my petty mortal fears seemed to shrink before such grandeur. The higher I climbed, the more the valley unfolded in splendor. Crumbling castles clung to pine-furred cliffs, cottages perched in the trees like birds' nests. Above them all the Alps raised their white peaks into the sky, spires of ice that belonged to another world. Crossing the Pélissier Bridge, the gorge yawned below like a wound in the earth, inviting me further up into the mountain mass. Chamonix embraced me at last, but its beauty struck a sterner chord than the gentler Servox I had left behind. Here nature showed a more formidable face. Walls of snow and ice pressed near the path, avalanches thundered in the distance, and their spray left fine mists hanging in the air. Over all loomed Mont Blanc, its brilliant dome a frozen crown against the heavens. Odd moments of joy found me on those lonely tracks. A familiar bend or a half-remembered view would stir memory of happier days, when childhood kept its simple charm. The mountain winds seemed to speak comfort, as if nature herself tried to dry my tears. But such relief never endured. Grief returned like a faithful shadow, and I would fall again into brooding. Sometimes I urged my mount on as if to outrun my own mind. At others I collapsed into the grass and let despair wash over me like cold rain. When I reached Chamonix village at last, I was hollowed by exhaustion. For a long while I stood at the window, watching pale lightning play above Mont Blanc, while the Arve sang below. Those gentle sounds began to still my ragged nerves, and when sleep finally came, it felt like a blessed friend. I welcomed its soft forgetting with open arms.
Chapter 10.
I wandered the valley that day, drawn to the birthplace of the Arveiron, where the glacier gives birth to the river. That river of ice inches down from the peaks like a living thing, quietly reshaping the world as it goes. Towering mountains hemmed me in, their steep faces capped by a gleaming wall of ice that hung above like a suspended cathedral. A few jagged pines stood as lonely sentinels, and in that great natural nave silence reigned, broken only by rushing water and the thunder of falling ice. The glacier would crack and groan, its ancient mass pulled apart by the slow laws of nature, as if some child were breaking a toy. Those magnificent views offered whatever comfort I could find. They lifted me beyond petty sorrow, and, while they could not erase grief, they softened it into something quieter. For a while they silenced the dark thoughts that had haunted me all month. At night I slept deeply, visited by visions of what I had seen, the pure white peaks, glittering spires, dark pine woods, and stark ravines. Even the eagle circling the clouds seemed to hover above my bed, whispering a small peace to my troubled heart. But morning stole that peace away. Sleep dissolved the consolations overnight had brought, and with the new day came rain and a thick fog that hid the mountains. My mighty friends now shrouded in gray. Still, I wanted to find them in their cloud world. What did rain matter? I called for my mule, determined to climb to Montanver's summit. I remembered how that immense moving glacier had first struck me, lifting my soul from shadow into light. Nature's power had always quieted me. Now I went alone, seeking the kind of solitude only the mountain path can give. The climb is steep, the path zigzagging in short, grinding turns that let you gain the sheer face. It is a lonely place. Winter avalanches had left their scars, trees broken and thrown, some ruined, others bent against the stone or fallen across their standing brothers. Higher up, ravines stuffed with snow crossed the trail, and stones constantly tumbled from above. One place is especially dangerous, so precarious that even a sudden shout seems to set the air trembling. The pines there are stunted and dark, adding a grim beauty to the route. From above I watched mist rising from the rivers, curling around the opposite slopes until their peaks vanished into clouds. Rain deepened the scene's melancholy. Why do we pride ourselves on deeper feelings than other creatures? It only makes us more vulnerable. A wind, a phrase, a sight can pierce us to the core. Dreams can poison sleep. A single wandering thought can cloud the day. We laugh or cry, think or believe. We hold sorrow close or fling it away. Either way, feelings pass, joy or grief leaves us. Yesterday will differ from tomorrow. The only constant is change. It was nearly midday when I reached the summit. I sat for a while on a rock above the frozen sea, mist hiding both the ice and the distant peaks. When the breeze finally cleared, I picked my way down onto the glacier itself. Its surface rose and fell like a frozen ocean, split by deep, bottomless crevasses. Though the field was scarcely a league across, it took me almost 2 hours to cross. On the far side, a sheer wall of rock rose straight up. From where I stood, Montanvert faced me a league away, and beyond it, Mont Blanc towered in terrible majesty. I sheltered in a rocky nook and drank in the sight. The great river of ice winding between its guardian mountains, peaks glittering in sunlight above the cloud line. My heavy heart lightened for a moment, and in that strange lift I called out to the empty air. Wandering spirits, if you truly roam and do not sleep in your graves, grant me this tiny happiness, or take me with you away from life's hollow joys. As I spoke those words, I suddenly saw a figure in the distance, moving toward me with impossible speed. He leaped over crevasses that had forced me to step carefully. As he drew closer, his height seemed to exceed any normal man's. Dread washed over me. My vision blurred and I felt faint, but the mountain's cold wind quickly revived me. As the shape came nearer, a sight both terrible and revolting, I realized it was the monster I had created. I trembled with rage and horror, resolved to wait for his approach and fight him to the death. He drew closer. His face showed bitter anguish mixed with contempt and malice, while his unnatural ugliness made him almost too hideous for human eyes. But I barely registered this. Rage and hatred had stolen my voice at first, and when I found it again, it was only to unleash a torrent of furious hatred and contempt. "Devil!" I shouted. "How dare you approach me? Don't you fear my vengeance? Get away, vile creature, or better yet, stay so I can crush you to dust. If only destroying your miserable existence could bring back the victims you murdered."
I expected this reception. All men hate the wretched. How much more must they hate me, the most miserable creature alive? Yet you, my creator, despise and reject me, though we're bound together until one of us dies. You want to kill me. How dare you play games with life? Do your duty to me, and I'll do mine to you and the rest of mankind. Meet my conditions, and I'll leave you all in peace. Refuse, and I'll feed death itself until it's gorged on the blood of everyone you love.
Abhorrent monster! Demon! Hell's tortures are too mild for your crimes. You blame me for creating you? Come then, Let me snuff out the spark I so carelessly gave you. My rage knew no bounds. I lunged at him, driven by every instinct that arms one being against another's existence. He dodged me easily.
Be calm, let me speak, before you unleash your hatred on me. Haven't I suffered enough, without you adding to my misery? Life may be nothing but anguish, but it's precious to me, and I'll defend it. Remember, you made me stronger than yourself. I'm taller, more agile. But I won't fight you. I am your creature, and I'll be gentle and obedient to my natural master if you'll do your part, what you owe me. Frankenstein, don't be fair to everyone else while trampling me alone when I deserve your justice, mercy, even your love most of all. Remember, I am your creation. I should be your Adam, but instead, I'm a fallen angel you've cast out from joy for no sin of my own. Everywhere I see happiness from which I alone am forever excluded. I was kind and good. Misery made me evil. Make me happy, and I'll be virtuous again.
Get away. I won't listen to you. There can be no peace between us. We are enemies. Leave, or let's settle this in a fight where one of us dies.
How can I reach you? Won't any plea make you look kindly on the creature who begs for your mercy and compassion? Believe me, Frankenstein, I was good once. My soul burned with love and humanity. But aren't I alone, utterly, miserably alone? You, my creator, despise me. What hope do I have with your fellow humans who owe me nothing? They reject and hate me. These barren mountains and frozen glaciers are my only refuge. I've wandered here for days. The ice caves, which alone don't frighten me, are my dwelling, the only home mankind doesn't begrudge me. I welcome these harsh skies because they're kinder than your people. If the world knew I existed, they'd do exactly what you're doing, arm themselves to destroy me. So shouldn't I hate those who despise me? I'll make no peace with my enemies. I'm wretched, and they'll share my misery. Yet you have the power to change this, to save them from an evil that could grow so vast it swallows not just you and your family, but thousands of others in its fury. Let compassion move you. Don't scorn me. Listen to my story. When you've heard it, abandon me or pity me as you think I deserve. But hear me out. Even the guilty, under your bloody human laws, are allowed to speak in their own defense before they're condemned. Listen to me, Frankenstein. You accuse me of murder, yet you destroy your own creation with a clear conscience. Oh, the perfect justice of mankind. I'm not asking you to spare me, just listen. And then, if you can and will, destroy what your hands made.
Why do you force me to remember, I shot back, the very circumstances that make me shudder, that I was the wretched cause of your existence? Cursed be the day you first drew breath, abhorrent devil. Cursed be the hands that shaped you, though I curse myself. You've made me miserable beyond words. You've stripped away my ability to think clearly about right and wrong. Get away. Spare me the sight of your loathsome form.
Then I'll spare you,
he said, raising his hated hands to cover my eyes. I struck them away violently.
There, I've removed the sight you find so revolting, but you can still listen and show me mercy. By whatever goodness I once had, I demand this of you. Hear my story. It's long and strange, and this freezing place isn't suited to your delicate nature. Come to the hut on the mountain. The sun still hangs high. Before it sets behind these snowy peaks to light another world, you'll have heard my tale and can decide my fate. It's up to you whether I disappear forever from human sight to live peacefully, or become a plague upon your people and the cause of your own swift destruction."
He turned and made his way across the ice, and I followed, my heart heavy with unspoken words. As we walked, I turned his arguments over in my mind, deciding at last that I would hear his tale. Curiosity pulled at me, yes, but something like pity sealed my choice. Until now, I'd believed without question that he'd murdered my brother. Perhaps his story would confirm or deny this terrible suspicion. And for the first time, I truly felt the weight of a creator's duty to his creation. Should I not have ensured his happiness before condemning his wickedness? These thoughts urged me forward. We crossed the frozen waste and climbed the rocky slope beyond. Cold rain began to fall again as we entered the hut. He with obvious triumph, I with a spirit as gray as the clouds above. Yet I had agreed to listen. I sat beside the fire my dreadful companion had lit, and he began his tale.
Chapter 11.
I struggle to recall those first moments of existence. They blur together like fragments of a dream, half remembered and fading, even as I reach for them. My senses had awakened all at once, overwhelming me with a flood of sight, sound, touch, and scent. Indistinguishable, chaotic, crashing against one another until I knew not what belonged to which. The light soon grew unbearable to my untested eyes, and I shut them tight. Darkness came then, bringing its own strange terror. When at last I dared to open them again, the world returned in all its brilliance, sharp and dazzling. I staggered forward, downward, I think, and suddenly the walls that had hemmed me in were gone. For the first time I could move freely, circling what stood in my path, instead of being bound by it. The sun burned hotter with every step until I fled into shadow. At last, weary beyond bearing, I dropped beside a brook, its cool waters drawing me down to rest. Hunger and thirst soon woke me. Clumsily, I gathered berries and drank until sleep overtook me once more. I woke to darkness and cold, my body trembling with fear and loneliness. Though I had taken garments from your rooms before leaving, they did little to protect me from the night's dew. Misery closed in from every side until I could do nothing but sit and weep. But then soft light crept into the sky, and I felt my first stirring of joy. Through the branches rose a pale orb, moving with gentle majesty across the heavens. I did not know its name then, but it was the moon, my first true companion. Its glow comforted me as I wandered again for berries. By chance, I found a heavy cloak beneath a tree, and wrapped myself in it, lying down once more to sleep. My mind then was little more than a tangled knot of sensations, light and dark, hunger and thirst, cold and warmth. Sounds pressed in from every side, scents drifted past me like strangers, but all blurred together. Only the moon remained clear, and I fixed my gaze on it, clinging to its serenity. So the days and nights passed. As the moon waned, I began to separate one thing from another. I knew the stream that quenched my thirst, the trees that sheltered me. With delight, I discovered that the sweet sounds filling the air came from tiny winged creatures, darting through shafts of sunlight. I learned to trace the shapes of the world, to distinguish the bright sky above from the dark mass of earth below. Often I tried to imitate the birds' songs, but the noises that left my throat were harsh and broken. They frightened me into silence, though I longed to give voice to what I felt stirring inside. The moon completed its cycle, returning slender and pale, while I still lingered in my forest refuge. Each day my understanding sharpened, as if my mind collected knowledge the way morning grass gathers dew. My eyes grew skilled at telling things apart, plants from insects, herbs from weeds. I began to notice the small differences in sound, the sparrow's sharp call against the rich, liquid notes of the blackbird and the thrush. The world was no longer a blur. It was slowly teaching me its language. One bitter day, I stumbled upon a fire left behind by passing beggars, and joy surged through me at its warmth. Eager to claim this marvel, I thrust my hand into the glowing embers, only to snatch it back with a cry of pain. How strange that a single thing could hold both comfort and agony. Cautiously I studied it further, discovering that the fire fed upon wood. I piled branches on eagerly, but most were too damp to catch. In frustration, I watched the flame dwindle until I saw that the wet sticks nearest the blaze began to dry, and then suddenly, they too caught fire. My delight was boundless. I set about gathering more wood, determined to guard this treasure. That night I feared the flames might die, so I arranged dry twigs beneath damp ones, coaxing the embers to glow again. At dawn, I uncovered them carefully, and with the help of a gentle breeze, they flared anew. From this I learned to fashion a crude fan of branches by which I could rouse dying sparks to life. How proud I felt of my discovery! The fire gave me not only heat and light, but new pleasures of the palate. Among the traveler's scraps I found meat touched by flame, richer and far more satisfying than berries. Eager to test this gift, I placed my own food upon the coals. The berries withered, but roots and nuts emerged transformed, carrying strange and wonderful flavors. Yet nature soon grew stingy. Some days I found little more than acorns to quiet the ache in my belly. At last, with sorrow, I resolved to leave my woodland shelter, and with it the fire I cherished like a living friend, a miracle I could not yet reproduce. For hours I puzzled over how to carry it with me, but in the end I could only wrap myself in my cloak and set out toward the sinking sun. 3 days I wandered among silent, snow-burdened trees, each step numbing my limbs, until the forest opened into wide country. The world lay veiled in white, lonely and vast, and I pressed on, though hunger gnawed at me. On the 7th morning, just as despair threatened to consume me, I glimpsed a shepherd's hut perched on a rise, the first sign of human habitation I had ever seen. I approached with awe, marveling at its simple walls and smoke curling into the air. The door hung ajar, and within I saw an old man bent over a fire preparing his meal. At the sound of my steps, he turned, and at the sight of me he shrieked and fled, vanishing with startling swiftness. Bewildered, I entered his dwelling. To me it was paradise, shelter from wind and snow, a floor that was dry beneath my feet, warmth close at hand. On the table lay bread, cheese, milk, and a dark liquid the man had left behind. I devoured all save the wine, which bit my tongue unpleasantly, then collapsed into a bed of straw and sank into deep, dreamless sleep. I woke at noon, drawn by the warm sunlight gleaming on the white ground, and decided to continue my journey. I packed the remains of the peasant's breakfast in a pouch I'd found, and walked across the fields for several hours until, at sunset, I reached a village. How miraculous it seemed! The simple huts, neat cottages, and grand houses each caught my wonder in turn. The vegetables growing in gardens, the milk and cheese I saw displayed in cottage windows, stirred my hunger. I entered one of the finest homes, but the moment I stepped through the door, children screamed and a woman fainted. The entire village erupted. Some people fled. Others attacked me, bruised and bleeding from stones and other thrown objects. I escaped to the countryside and took frightened refuge in a low hovel that looked wretched compared to the palaces I'd just seen in the village. This shelter was attached to a neat, pleasant-looking cottage, but after my costly lesson, I didn't dare enter it. My refuge was built of wood, but so low I could barely sit upright. There was no wooden floor, just bare earth, which was at least dry. Though wind crept through countless gaps in the walls, I found it a welcome shelter from snow and rain. I made my refuge as comfortable as I could, lining the floor with fresh straw before retreating into its shadows. The memory of last night's cruelty was still too raw to risk being seen by the distant figure approaching. I had stolen a loaf of coarse bread for sustenance, and found a discarded cup to drink the crystal-clear water that flowed near my shelter. The hovel's slight elevation kept it dry, and its proximity to the cottage chimney blessed it with a gentle warmth. This humble space, though crude, felt like heaven compared to my previous existence among the dripping branches and cold earth of the forest. As I savored my first peaceful breakfast in memory, I noticed movement through a narrow crack in the wall. A young woman passed by, carrying a pail upon her head with graceful determination. Unlike the coarse farmhands I would later encounter, she moved with a quiet dignity despite her simple blue petticoat and linen jacket. Her fair hair was plainly braided, and her face bore an expression of patient melancholy that stirred something within me. When she returned with milk, a young man met her on the path. His face carried an even deeper sorrow than hers, and he wordlessly took the burden from her, their shared grief hanging in the air between them as they disappeared into the cottage. Through another small crevice, remnants of an old window, I discovered I could observe their home. The room was spare, but pristinely kept, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the dim light. An elderly man sat hunched by the fire, his posture speaking of deep weariness. But when he took up his instrument, the music that emerged was pure enchantment, sweeter than any birdsong I had ever heard in my solitary wanderings. The young woman sat beside him, her needlework forgotten as tears gathered in her eyes. When her quiet weeping became audible, the old man's gentle response and tender smile awakened strange new feelings in my breast, a bittersweet ache I had never known from mere physical sensations of hunger or cold. The youth soon returned with firewood, and I watched their domestic ritual unfold like a dance. They shared bread and cheese, gathered vegetables from their garden, and moved about their tasks with quiet efficiency. The contrast between the elderly man, his silver hair and benevolent face radiating warmth, and the handsome but despondent youth struck me deeply. Even in their poverty and evident sadness, their gentle care for one another revealed a beauty I had never before witnessed. As the young man departed again with different tools in hand, I remained hidden in my hovel, transfixed by this first glimpse of human tenderness and grace. As darkness crept across the sky, I discovered something marvelous. These gentle souls had mastered a way to push back the night with small flames they called candles. My heart leaped to realize that sunset would not steal away my newfound joy of watching them. Through the evening hours, the young woman and her companion busied themselves with tasks I could not yet comprehend, while the old man returned to his mysterious instrument, drawing forth those same heavenly sounds that had bewitched me at dawn. When he finished, the younger man began to make strange utterances, not music, nor anything like the sweet melodies of birds, but something measured and deliberate. I would later learn he was reading aloud, though in those moments I remained ignorant of the wondrous art of written words. At last, as though following some silent signal, the family extinguished their precious lights and withdrew to their chambers for the night's rest, leaving me alone once more in the velvet darkness.
Chapter 12.
I lay restless on my bed of straw, my mind drifting through the day's sights like a ship lost in fog. What haunted me most was the gentleness of these people, how fiercely I longed to step into their quiet world, yet fear held me back. The memory of the villagers' hatred still stung, raw as an open wound. So I remained hidden, a ghost lingering at the edge of their lives, watching, learning, yearning. Before dawn, the cottage would stir. The young woman moved about with practiced grace, preparing their simple meal, while the young man shouldered his tools and went out into the fields. Day followed, day like water flowing downhill. I watched the rhythm of their lives, the youth working tirelessly, the sister tending to endless tasks, and the old man, sightless yet full of life, filling their home with music and gentle thought. Every gesture between them breathed with kindness. Their smallest acts of devotion seemed to warm the very air around them.